Hello again, everyone. In this lesson, we'll focus on the interface between grammar and phonology. Something important that we need to remember is that normally in any language, the sounds are going to influence one another, especially when they're in context, when they're spoken at a regular speed, and sometimes some sounds are going to assimilate or become similar to other sounds, and even sometimes they may combine to create new sounds. Now, this is something that is very evident in grammatical endings because we're going to see that the previous sound will affect the pronunciation of the grammatical ending. Let's look at this first example concerning nouns and their plurals. First of all, we can see that nouns can end in these three different kinds of sounds. First of all, they could end with a voiceless sound such as book or hat, or they could end with a voiced sound such as bag and king. And finally, they could end with any of these special kind of sounds that are called sibilants, including s and z and sh and j and ch and j. So for each of these cases, the pronunciation of the plural is going to be different. And so book becomes books, hat becomes hats, cup becomes cups, student becomes students, bag becomes bags, king becomes kings, bed becomes beds, and car becomes cars. Now, what's going to happen with the sounds that end with sibilant sounds? In this case, what is going to happen is that we need to add an additional sound because it is impossible to produce two sibilant sounds one after the other. So we're going to add like another sound. In this case, it can be is or is, and so the plural become church, churches, house, houses, badge, badges, and box, boxes. Now, in your exercise sheet, write the phonological rule for the plural nouns. Second example in which we're going to see the assimilation of grammatical endings is the one concerning third person singular s. And then again, we have three different groups of verbs. Some of them end with a voiceless sound such as talk or work. Some others end with a voiced sound such as say or give. And finally, there's a group of verbs that end with a sibilant sound such as miss or watch. What is going to happen in this case is exactly the same. Talk becomes talks, work becomes works, visit becomes visits, laugh becomes laughs, say becomes says, give becomes gives, decide becomes decides, and sing becomes sings. And finally, for the last group, exactly in the same way as we explained before, another sound is going to be added between the sibilant sound and the third singular grammatical ending. And so miss becomes misses, watch becomes watches, wash becomes washes, and judge becomes judges. Then again, what I want you to do is go to your handout and write the phonological rule for the pronunciation of the third person singular s. If we look at the marker for the possessive s, we will find exactly the same pattern. So there are some names that will end with voiceless sounds such as Mike or Pat, and some others that will end with voiced sounds such as John and Paul, and some others that will end with sibilant sounds such as George or Louis. For these cases, we will follow exactly the same pattern. So Mike becomes Mike's, and Pat becomes Pat's, and Luke becomes Luke's, and Robert becomes Robert's. On the other hand, for the voiced sound names, we will have John, that will become John's, and Paul will become Paul's, and Carl will become Carl's, and Sue will become Sue's. Finally, for the sibilant sounds, George will become George's, and Louis will become Louis's, and James will become James's, and finally Douglas will become Douglas's. So we now know how to write the phonological rule for the pronunciation of the possessive marker s. Example of the assimilation of a grammatical ending will be with the past tense id, which can also be for the past participle of regular verbs. And we have three different patterns. First of all, there are some verbs that end with voiced sounds such as cry or move, and some others that will end with voiceless sounds such as kiss or jump, and finally some other verbs that will end with the sound d or with the sound t. Now the pronunciation of the past tense marker will be as follows. Cry will become cried, and move will become moved, view will become viewed, rub will become rubbed, and stay will become stayed. So we can see that the pronunciation in this case is as d. In the second case, the verbs ending with voiceless sounds will be as follows. Kiss will become kissed, jump will become jumped, watch will become watched, walk will become walked, and laugh will become laughed. Finally, for the verbs that end with the sound t or with sound d, this will be the rule. Decide will become decided, and want will become wanted, and visit will become visited, and need will become needed, and finally wait will become waited. So we can see that for all of those verbs that end with the sounds t or d, we will need to add a vowel sound and then the marker of the past tense d, so that it will become id. So I think that now you're ready to write the phonological rule for the pronunciation of the past tense id. So we can now conclude that grammatical endings are going to be assimilated to the last sound of the words to which they are attached. If there is a voiceless sound, the grammatical ending will be a voiceless sound. If the last sound is a voiced sound, the grammatical ending will also be a voiced sound. And finally, if we have a similar sound, we will need to add a vowel sound between the grammatical marker and this last sound. So in words such as visit, we will have visited, and in words such as wash, we will have washes. So this was all I had to say about the interface between grammar and phonology. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I will be seeing you next time.